Hey everybody, I hope you had a great week. Today's lesson is going to be using the EQuIP, and the EQuIP stands for Educators Evaluating the Quality of Instructional Products. And this is an initiative designed to just identify high quality materials that are fully aligned with the Common Core, and also to invite teachers to evaluate their own products in a judgment-free space. So everybody feels comfortable sharing their work, and it's done with the goal of just making things better for students. So as I said, the purpose of the EQuIP is to assure that we are aligning our lessons and units to the Common Core to the depth that the standards demand. It's not meant to evaluate teachers at all. It's just looking at the lessons so that we can identify good practices and we can use as many of those good lessons that we have identified, share them, and make the most out of our classroom time. In this slide, there's a couple links that you can click on the Google Docs. Remember, they're also linked in the description box below, and you can find them on Blackboard. But if you want to read more about the purpose of the EQuIP, you can just click on either one of those links and it will take you there right away. The goal for the EQuIP activity is for reviewers to develop the ability of using the protocol to examine student work and provide evidence-based feedback for both the task and the lesson, or it can also be used for a unit, like a big unit, many lessons together. And also it's meant to educate the reviewers on how to align tasks, how to look for quality tasks, and also to understand the varying levels that can exist within the EQuIP. I would say that another benefit of the EQuIP is that you just get more and more familiar with the math standards for your grade level, and then also you get more and more familiar with using the progression, so you have a very clear understanding of where things fall vertically as well as at your grade level. So there's 4 dimensions of the quality review rubric. The first one is alignment to the depth. The second one is key shifts in the Common Core State Standards. The third one is instructional and supports. And the fourth one is assessment. Let me show you what an empty EQuIP form looks like. So here's the EQuIP. If you notice here, you can see where it's divided into different sections. So this is the first section, which is looking for the alignment to the depth of the Common Core State Standards. And it has some boxes for you to check and has an open field for comments, and then you get a rating for that. If you scroll down to the next page, you have number 2, the key shifts in the Common Core State Standards. It looks for focus, coherence, and rigor. So you're going to look at the lesson and have a chance to look at the focus, coherence, and rigor for that lesson using the Common Core State Standards and the progressions. This would be an area for you to summarize and suggest improvement, and at the bottom is the rating. The next page has instructional supports. It has some factors to consider in how the lesson or unit is responsive to varying student needs. So how well is this lesson differentiated? For anything that is just a lesson, you just do this top part. And if you're looking for a whole unit, you do the top part and the bottom part. There's an area for observations and suggestions for improvement, and you get a rating for that. The next page is assessment. So for assessment, they're looking to see what direct observable evidence there is, how unbiased the assessment is, and then how well were the materials that would be used for assessment, how well were those constructed. If there was something longer than just a lesson, then you would also include this bottom part. There's always an open field for you to write observations and suggestions for improvement, and you get a rating. And then the very last page is a summary of everything. You give the lesson an overall rating, based on how they scored. So it will give you down here how they would score in the various sections. If you feel like I'm going too fast right now, I probably am, just only because I want you to see what the form looks like, but we're going to break it down into smaller pieces here in a minute. One thing to note is that as you work with the EQuIP, you will hear several times that we want this aligned with the Common Core state standards. If at any point something is not aligned with the Common Core state standards, you should stop the process and it should be returned to the creator of the lesson for them to revise it before going on any further. So it's not asking you to delve deeply into something that ultimately is not going to be any use. Like, we don't want anything that is not aligned with the standards first. So now that we've seen the dimensions for the rubric, let's look at the discrete steps for the task. By using these discrete steps, it will enable you to articulate the relationship between the student work, the quality and alignment of tasks, and the instruction. I'm just going to list these and then we're going to break it down even smaller. First step is analyzing the task. The second step is examining instructional context and Common Core state standards alignment. The third is analyzing individual student work. The fourth is analyzing the collection of student work. And the fifth is providing suggestions for improving the material. Now on the slide, you will notice two links. This first link for the EQuIP resources is a link that will take you to a Google Drive that has all the EQuIP materials. The second one is a long division example that we're going to be using to model the use of the EQuIP. Okay, so this first one is resources. The second one is just a video that we're going to use as the task to evaluate using the EQuIP rubric. As always, this will be linked in the Google Slides, it will be linked in the description box below, and it will also be on Blackboard. So step one is analyzing the task. So without consulting standards or progressions, anything like that, what you're going to do is you're going to watch the lesson and review it. And you should only limit your observations to what the task communicates about its purpose and demands. That's it. You should consider the content addressed, so the abstract goals of like what students would know, what students would understand, and the performances required. So what evidence are they doing? We're going back to the specific learning objectives. If we want them to understand something, we have to have them engage in behavior that is aligned with that understanding. So make sure that that matches. Ask yourself, why is the student doing this task? And how does it relate to the goals of the lesson? What will they gain from it so that they can continue to use this in later material? Keep in mind what types of student reasoning might be required. Are they asking to compare or judge? Are they asked to provide an example? Are they asked to make generalizations based on the data for something else? Like, what kind of reasoning is included in this? And then if you're able to make some determination on what mathematical practices are also being addressed, that would be great too. So you're going to stop at this point and you're going to go ahead and watch the long division lesson. If you have the time, I would suggest that you watch it more than once. And if you're able to open it up in another screen so that you can go back and forth between my video and that video, you'll find it useful. As always, this will be linked in the Google Slides, it will be linked in the description box below, and it will also be on Blackboard. So go ahead and pause my video, click on the long division video and watch it a couple times, and return to my video once you've done so. So as I watch this video, several things come to mind. First of all, the creator of the video did a really great job in putting in certain cues to help us identify things like the mathematical practice standards, etc. So as we're watching this, obviously the content that's being addressed is long division, dividing 3 digits by 1 digit. And the Common Core state standard that she was aiming to address is find whole number quotients and remainders with up to 4-digit dividends and 1-digit divisors. So at this point, she was having the students divide 3-digit numbers by 1-digit numbers, using strategies based on place value, the properties of operations, and/or the relationship between multiplication and division. And specifically, she was aiming to address the mathematical instructional shift number 4, which is deep understanding. As I watch this, this is what she wanted the students to know, that the place value is important when working with long division, right? And also that she wanted the students to actually be able to do the division by using the number disc, as she called them. So she had the concrete representation with the number discs, and then some of the kids were also using the representation phase by using these little things that we see here, these little mini dry erase boards, to represent this without the number disc. So I'm already starting to see differentiation. The task seems to be aligned, right? What are students asked to do? They're asked to create groups, they're asked to use multiplication to check their answers, so use the inverse operation to check their answers. They are aiming to use this again in later studies. She says that the next day's lesson builds on the previous day, and ultimately they're going to be going to 4-digit dividends. What kind of thinking was happening here? Well, I would definitely say that the students are having to make judgments based on the comparison of their work against their partner's work. And they were also engaging in what they call residue, which is providing examples of how this is true or arguing why something is true by eliminating other possibilities. So these are the things I saw offhand. Step 2 has 2 parts. First, we're going to examine supporting materials, including supports for scoring student work and targeted standards for evidence of purpose and the intent of the task. For example, we can scan the entire lesson. We noted its purpose, the content, and the organization. We're going to look for the placement of the task within the lesson, which we don't really know what came before. She didn't really talk about what happened before. She did sort of allude to what will happen later, but we don't see any evidence for it. So we can only go what we saw in the video. We're going to locate and compare the standard that she aimed to target with the one that is actually in the lesson. And we're going to compare the work and findings for the task to any answer keys, scoring guidelines, rubric that might be found. Then we're also going to analyze the quality of the alignment between the standard that she aimed to address and the actual standards in the Common Core state standards, and also looking at the progressions to see if we are fully understanding what is required. She actually tells us in the video that she is going to be targeting a certain standard, and that standard, if I recall, is right here. So this is what they aimed to target, which was the 4th grade standard for numbers base 10 0.6. So let's go ahead and go to the Common Core State Standards and see to what degree she has met this criteria. Okay, so here are the Common Core State Standards, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll all the way down. Second grade, down to fourth grade. Okay, I want to read the focus standards. So I'm going to take a moment to read this as carefully as I can. And what does it say about division? Well, it says grade 4 instructional time should focus on 3 critical areas: developing an understanding and fluency with multi-digit multiplication, and developing understanding of dividing to find quotients involving multi-digit dividends. Aha! So it is a huge part of this grade because it's a focus standard. And then if I go into this area right here, where they delve into more detail, it says students generalize their understanding of place value to 1,000,000, understanding the relative sizes of numbers in each place, and apply their understanding of models for multiplication, equal size groups, arrays, and area models, place values, and properties of operations. In particular, the distributive property as they develop, discuss, and use efficient, accurate, and generalizable methods to compute products of multi-digit whole numbers. Okay, that's multiplication. Depending on the numbers and the context, they select and accurately apply appropriate methods to estimate or mentally calculate products. They develop fluency with efficient procedures for multiplying whole numbers, understand and explain why procedures work based on place value and properties of operations used to solve problems. All right, here we go. Students apply their understanding of models for division, place value, properties of operations, and the relationship of division to multiplication, and they develop, discuss, and use efficient, accurate, and generalizable procedures to find quotients involving multi-digit dividends. They select and accurately apply appropriate methods to estimate and mentally calculate quotients and interpret remainders based on context. All right, so let's go down here, see what else it says down here for NBT and 6. So it's this one right here. Use place value, understanding, and properties of operations to perform multi-digit arithmetic. This is just slightly different than what is in the information that the teacher posted, but it says find whole number quotients and remainders with up to 4-digit dividends and 1-digit divisors using strategies based on place value, the properties of operations, and the relationship between multiplication and division. Illustrate and explain the calculation by using equations, rectangular arrays, or area models. Okay, and I'm just going to click back to here, and she did not address the entire standard. Okay, very good. Okay, so that is the Common Core State Standard. Okay, so I'm going to run over to the progressions, and here they are. I'm going to look for the numbers base 10 progression, and here it is, number and operations in base 10. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the 4th grade section to start there first. And then I can work backwards or forwards, however I need to. I passed it. Where are you, 4th grade? Come here. There it is. Okay, 4th grade right here. Grade 4 students extend their work in base 10 system. They use the standard algorithms to fluently add and subtract. Okay, so they should be in the abstract phase for adding and subtracting. They use methods based on place values and properties of operations supported by suitable representations to multiply and divide with multi-digit numbers. So they're saying that this area right here would benefit from concrete and representational phases. So while they have to be fluent in addition and subtraction by the time they get into 4th grade is going to be their first experience working with representations of multiplication and division. All right. Also, they want them to use place value, and reinforce the idea of place value in division and multiplication. And if you can see this, I don't know if you can, where it says 4NBT1, you can also find stuff. Okay, here I found 4NBT6. And this is what we're working with in this section a lot. And if you notice here, they're talking about division as finding group size. So here, this is called partative division. They have given the students the number of groups, and they have to decide how many is in each group. That's what we saw in the video. In the progressions, you can see here in this paragraph that says another component of understanding general methods for multi-digit division computation is the idea of decomposing the dividend into like base 10 units and finding the quotient unit by unit, starting with the largest unit and continuing on to the smaller units. And this is what we saw in the video, where they would take something like 745 and they would break it down into 700s and 4 10s and 5 1s. The students were given 3 groups, and they would see that they could put in 200s into each one of the groups, and that last 100 would have to be decomposed into 10 10s. Okay, and that's what they did here. As with multiplication, this relies on the distributive property. This can be viewed as finding the side length of a rectangle. The divisor is the length of the other side, or as allocating objects. The divisor is the number of groups, or the number of objects in each group. In this one, in the video, we saw an example of the number of objects in each group, which is partative division. What we did not see is the divisor is the number of groups, which is quotative division. So I'm going to put an additional video linked here for you to see the difference between the two, but both of them have to be addressed in this standard. Also, if we go back to the standard, did not go up to 4-digit dividends by 1-digit divisors. It seems as though she's working that way, but based on what we saw in the video, she has not met that part yet. Using strategies based on place value, that has been done. The properties of operations and or the relationship between multiplication and division. I don't know that she necessarily met the property of operations. She definitely had the children working in the relationship between multiplication and division as inverse operations. And then illustrate and explain the calculations by using equations, rectangular arrays, and or area models. So she did not actually get to the part where they were using the equations, rectangular arrays, or area models. So she is on her way. She has very strong direction in meeting the standard, but as of this point, it has not been met to the full degree. So the last thing we're supposed to examine is answer keys, scoring guidelines, and or rubrics related to the task. We don't have that, so we cannot assume that it exists. Now keep in mind, it may seem like I'm being really, really tough on this teacher, but we only saw a 10-minute part of her lesson. So while what we saw was outstanding, we can only go by the evidence that we are able to identify. When we are aligning the task with the standards, there are different descriptors that can evaluate this. Full alignment is that the expectation of the task addresses all aspects of the identified standards. Partial alignment, the expectations of the task addresses the most central aspects of the identified standards. However, some of the less critical aspects of the standards may not be addressed, likely by design. And limited alignment, the expectations of the task do not address the most central aspects of the identified standards. However, some of the less central aspects of the standards are addressed. And finally, the last one is no alignment. When we are looking at connections from this 4th grade standard onward, there's a couple things that we should look at. right here on it says a note on notation. They talk about how to describe remainders. While this lesson isn't necessarily with remainders, it's moving towards working with remainders. And so I would argue that this is part of moving the students towards parts of a whole, in other words, fractions. Also moving the students towards decimals and eventually percent. So there is a connection in that, and you could go back and read this in more detail to see if there's anything more. But I would say that there's definitely a connection, that this is moving towards the following: division with remainders, the idea that the remainders are part of a whole. They're going to be looking at how division is also modeled using a rectangular array, whereas the multiplication was the area of the array. The divisors would be the length and the width of the array. And the same with a area model. If we look at the 5th grade standards, this first section right here, let me see if I can make this bigger without it. Division in 5th grade extends grade 4 methods in 2-digit divisors. So it's going to start looking at what does it mean to have a 2-digit divisor. Students continue to decompose the dividend into base 10 units and find the quotient place by place, starting from the highest place. They illustrate and explain their calculations using equations, rectangular arrays, and/or area models. Estimating the quotients is a new aspect of dividing by a 2-digit number. Even if the students round the dividend appropriately, the resulting estimate may need to be adjusted up or down. Okay, so they're going to be using these same ideas in 5th grade, but this time they're extending it to 2-digit divisors. Another thing we wanted to do is take a look to see which mathematical practices were covered in this. And in her video, and I'll see if I can just like try to find it just by moving the information right here. Okay, she uses, teacher wants student to specify units to better demonstrate the concept. So they're saying that this is an example of math practice 6. And I thought I saw one earlier. I thought she said like 1 or something. Math practice 5, using concrete model to deepen their understanding in preparation for transitioning to deeper understanding of the abstract long division algorithm. Okay, so the teacher claims to meet MP5 and MP6. I would say that there's more in there, but I need to look at what the practices are, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. Students did seem to be on task. None of them gave up the task. From what I could see, they all were participating, looked good. They reasoned abstractly and quantitatively. They were using the concrete manipulatives as well as the representation on those little dry erase boards, and they were writing down the numbers. So I would argue that they met that one too. Number 3, construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. They were talking with one another, and they were looking to see if they agreed or disagreed with what the speaker was saying. I would say they modeled with mathematics because they had the place value charts and they had the number discs. They used the appropriate tools strategically because they used the number disc to help them understand and also show their strategies to one another. They attended to precision. You kind of had to with that because they had to pay attention to units. They had to pay attention to how they were placing that into the different categories that they had made. They looked for and made use of structure. I would say that they saw the structure of the place value and the structure of the numbers that they were using to be able to separate things out. And then they have the same rationale when they were able to break down the hundreds into 10 tens. They also were able to break down a 10 into 10 ones. So I would say that they met a lot of these. I think they might have met all of them. I think she's being too hard on herself in this situation, because she, as far as I can tell, there's evidence for all of them. Maybe not so much 7, but at least the rest of them. So the next step, analyzing student work, this one's going to be a little bit more difficult because we didn't really see a whole lot of the student work. We don't have it to analyze. We saw the students engaging in the activity. We saw various parts of that engagement and using a lot of the strategies, but we don't have anything to really evaluate. So this can be difficult to do. Aside from the students that answered the questions out loud, I don't know that there's a whole lot there to be able to assess. The teacher did ask a lot of close-ended questions, so she never really asked the students to elaborate on their thinking. When I did see that is when they were working with one another. While the teacher could have been listening to this, and I'm sure she was to some extent, she wouldn't have been able to hear all the children. So it would have been nice to get more of the open-ended questions out loud. Another thing that I noticed is when the little boy at the end is using multiplication to check his work, he stops using the place value when he's multiplying. And if you go back and look at it, he'll say something like,
no, but that's wrong, because 8 4 times 4 is not, doesn't give you, the 1 doesn't have a 6. Oh.
I know there are going to be 23.
6. 182.
182.
Okay, so 182.
And then there's no remainder.
Multiply it by 3. 2 times 3 is 6. 8 times 3 is...
So look, what he's saying is he's multiplying 182 times 3. So he's saying 2 times 3 is 6, 8 times 3 is 24. But he's not multiplying 8 times 3. He's really multiplying 80 times 3 because the 8 in 182 is in the tens place. So, and then he's carrying the 2, right? Instead of saying, I'm carrying 200, he says, I'm carrying 2.
It's 24. Yep. 24, and add the 2 on the top of the 1.
See, add the 2 at the top of the 1. You want to add 200 to 100. So while that doesn't seem like such a big deal, it does contradict the work that the teacher was doing in the class. So I would just try to nudge the students to try to at least, if they're doing the algorithm this way, to go back and explain that they have clear understanding that they're not adding a 2 to the 1, they're adding 200 to 100. So let me explain a little bit better here what the little boy did. So the little boy said 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 8 is 24, and I'm going to add the 2 to the 1, and then 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5, so it's 546. Well, the algorithm that he did was correct. Where I would have an issue, and I would want to gear the student towards using the words hundreds and tens in his explanation, is saying, well, really what we have here is 100 times 3, 80 times 3, and 2 times 3. So 100 times 3 is 300, 80 times 3 is 240, and 2 times 3 is 6. And if we were to add all this up together, that's why we get 546. So for as much that the teacher is focusing on place value, I would point this out as just sort of a teaching point for those students. Now, does that mean that the whole class needs a reteach? No. This is just a point of differentiation. This would increase the attending to precision standard for that little boy. Okay, because that's what he would need in order to make sure that he has full conceptual understanding of what's happening here. This goes back to the lecture that we had about understanding and how we want students to have relational understanding. We want the idea of place value to have a connection from the time that they start to explore it in kindergarten, first grade, as they move through to fourth grade, looking at division and multiplication, how that translates into place value, and then moving forward, how that also is related to place value. So you want those interconnections. You're looking for that cohesion between different skills. This cohesion works also with the idea of Piaget. They're taking what they know and building onto it, and what they have now built will soon be schema for another topic. So it's building a strong foundation that students can extend their understanding of mathematics as a whole. So step 4 has you analyze the collection of student work and looking at patterns that might exist, looking for components that it seems as though a lot of the class understood, and looking at how that was taught to see if there was anything that really spoke to that class and was really beneficial for them. And also looking at instances where they had misunderstandings to see if perhaps the teacher might have a misunderstanding insofar as the math, or the strategies that are being used aren't as effective, and looking for new strategies that would work better. In this particular lesson, from what we're able to see in that 10-minute snippet, because it's really snippet, we didn't see the whole lesson, there isn't a whole lot to go with. So this one's a little bit difficult to work with as well. Step 5 is providing suggestions for improving the materials. I want you to think of teaching and coaching your peers as it just being an ongoing process of improvement. Just like athletes are constantly trying to refine their skills and become better at their sport, or musicians or dancers are constantly trying to refine their talents, as teachers, we should do that for ourselves and also do that for our students. Any suggestions, they should be given and taken with the understanding that this is meant to improve the process, improve the teaching, improve the instruction, improve the student results. So looking for a way to show this in the template is really important. So again, all comments and suggestions should be constructive and evidence-based. For guiding questions, you want to look to see if, how anything from how the delivery was conducted, meaning the delivery of instruction was conducted for the students. Could there be a way to tweak it so that the students better understand what is expected of them? In this particular instance, I thought the teacher gave very, very clear instruction to the students. They all seemed to understand what to do. We don't really know what the unit plan was, so we can't really speak to that because there's no evidence for that. And does the task allow for students to demonstrate their own level of proficiency? I would say yes. She had the number discs, as she called them, and she also had students that were already in the representation phase, and I did see her working towards the algorithm. So that was really well done. So yeah, so these are just some guiding questions. At the end, we always just want to reflect as teachers. So once you're done using with the EQuIP, you want to reflect on what you also have learned from this and been able to take away, what has inspired you to do better, what has inspired you to learn more about. What I want to emphasize is that EQuIP is something that is meant to improve everybody. It's meant to improve the work of the student, the work of the teacher, the work of the group, the work of the school. This should not be based on judgment. It should be based on evidence. If something is not clear, then you need to look for more specific evidence. So here are some additional sites that might work if you're, so here are some additional sites that might be of interest if you're looking to look for lessons that you want to turnkey, if you want to learn more about the EQuIP, all this is there for you. As for me, I will say that I have a sample EQuIP for this lesson already here for you. I'm going to go ahead and put it up for you in Blackboard. You're going to have a journal entry based on how the EQuIP was written. So one thing I do want to point out is that there are sections of the EQuIP that will have this little plus sign at the bottom, and what that means is you have to click the plus sign so that you can move the slider and see all of the suggestions. So this is what a completed EQuIP looks like. You can read all the suggestions and learn more about it. It has all the ratings. And if I were going to go through this real quickly, in the first alignment, I showed that she was aligned. She met all the criteria for the dimension. For the second one, for key shifts, looking at focus, coherence, and rigor, I show that she met many of the criteria for the dimension. For the instructional supports, I found that she had a lot of the criteria that she met, but she could have improved the productive struggle for students in asking them more extended questions. I didn't see a lot of differentiation. I just saw the differentiation as far as like the manipulatives, but I didn't see anything for like cultural linguistic backgrounds or any extra supports for students that might be working below grade level or any extensions for students that were working above grade level. So I didn't give her points for that, and that gave her a 2. The next one is the assessment. We already discussed how there wasn't a whole lot in assessment here, so I had to give her 0 based only on the fact that I did not see this. Again, you want to just click on this little page and you'll be able to see this. This talks about the self-task process and self-regulation feedback, which we did not go into a whole lot of detail, but I will link a video if you want to see what that's about. And then finally, because of the assessment work being absent, she scored an R, which is needs revision. But, you know, I mean, I have no doubt that she would have done great. I just needed to know what she would have gotten in the assessment piece. I have no doubt she would have gotten an EI or possibly even an E. I don't know. We'll never know because there's no assessment. So that is it for today. Make sure that you go in, find the documents in Blackboard, and go in and do your journal entry. That will be the extent of what you have to complete for your EQuIP activity. Have a great rest of your week. Bye!